I will call to order all of the agencies which are meeting tonight, which consists of the Library Board, the Water District Board, the Redevelopment Agency, the Airport Authority, the Rail Authority, and the Victorville City Council. All of those items, all of those meetings will open simultaneously. The custom and habit of this council is we begin every meeting first with an invocation, followed by the pledge. Tonight, the invocation will be delivered by Pastor Hector Gonzalez from God's Garden Church. That'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by our Chief of Police, Captain Mark Taylor. Will you please stand?
First of all, let me just thank you for allowing me to be here with you. I truly consider it an honor and privilege to be here with you tonight. Go to the Lord in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we're just so grateful to you for allowing us to be here tonight. We just thank you for this wonderful country that we live in. We thank you for the freedom that we have here. Father, I thank you for the City Council. I thank you for these board members. They have made the decision to be servants of the city, and I pray that you would bless them and bless their families. I thank you for this meeting tonight. I pray that the decisions that would be made in accordance to your will. We thank you for all that you're doing here. We thank you for Victorville. It's a great city. I lived here all my life, and I can truly say that we've been blessed to live in the city. We thank you, and we give you all the honor and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We want to welcome each and every one of you to these chambers, your opportunity to participate in the affairs of your city, and we appreciate you being here. We're going to have a couple of deviations from the normal course of business. Sometimes in the life of a city, we have an opportunity to pay some special recognition to some very special people. And tonight is one of those. Sergio, where are you? Come up here. Something to help somebody else. All of those opportunities lost because of not knowing for sure what to do. Now and then there's an extraordinary person act, regardless of the consequences and risks. Sergio Manuelis is an example of kind citizen. I've known Sergio for a long time. I've always known him to be a really. I'll tell you, those of you who were here this weekend, oh, how damn cold, how much rain unexpectedly was falling from the sky. Had he called in sick, nobody would have faulted him for that. Sick. He went to street water. I called Sergio the next day, telling him how proud I was, how proud the city was. Always something, he said, you know, when I was in the water, because you know, golf course like the back of his knee, realized that we were going down towards the Pebble Beach Bridge. On that, you move down through parts of the channel that have rocks, concrete. I was afraid. I was afraid too. But he made it through the Pebble Beach, underneath the Pebble pylons that he had to go. Never lost sight of what it was. So, there's not a lot that we can do for you, Sergio. I wanted to give you a year off. The government and the council are a lot more stingy. And then John Roberts said he would okay it if I give him a year off.
You need Sergio more than me.
Before I read this, I want to indicate that Sergio was not alone in the efforts to save this young girl. There were several of our maintenance workers, various degrees, participated in this rescue. They will receive special recognition shortly. But I want them to stand so that you can see other very extraordinary, very special people, proud of as we are of Sergio, and their names are Jason McDowell, please stand. Jacob here's what happened, and I don't think we ought to wait till the next council meeting, caught up in the holiday season, some of the importance of this loss. So, not knowing about these other people, I set in motion to give Sergio a proclamation, and there will be other proclamations of them. Tonight, the spotlight is on Sergio. Whereas President Theodore Roosevelt once said, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is right. The worst thing you can do is right. As the City of Victorville employee Sergio Manuelos, lead worker at the Green Tree Golf Course, while cleaning debris near the Oro Grande Wash during a heavy rainstorm, saw a young girl floating down the torrential river, calling for help. Did the right thing, taking immediate action without giving a thought to his own safety. Whereas Sergio Manuelos placed his concern for a total stranger, fast-moving water, grabbed the 14-year-old girl, floated along with her in the strong current, and helped her to safety. Whereas, had it not been for the effort, life might have been lost. Now, therefore, I, Terry Caldwell, Mayor of the City of Victorville, do hereby join the other members of the City Council in recognizing Sergio Manuelos for his heroism. I'm here to set our local hero. As many of you know, there are state mandates that deal with the requirement to reduce the amount of refuse that goes to a landfill and to increase the amount of recyclable materials. It's all part of what is referred to as Assembly Bill 939 and related legislation. And tonight we have some presentations to the winners of the recycle contest, and I would like to call Roe from the Sanitation Department. She will help announce the winners. And we have a sculpture grand prize, and we have a poster grand prize. So if we can...
Not that you're mentioning names, huh?
I'm Roe Ratliff, and I work for the City of Victorville's recycling program. Dana Armstrong, who's the solid waste manager for the city, was unable to be here tonight due to another appointment, but has asked me to present these awards on her behalf. We are here tonight to recognize Victorville Recycles Week 2007 Poster and Recycled Sculpture Contest Grand Prize winners. These students displayed outstanding art and recycling messages. I had the great pleasure to work with many schools in the city during the first annual Victorville Recycles Week. It was so great to visit the schools, see all of the good things that they are doing, and to meet so many wonderful faculty, staff, and students. The schools really got involved in Victorville Recycles Week. They organized recycling drives for bottles and cans, athletic shoes, phone books, and newspapers. They scheduled class recycling presentations, held recycling assemblies, and went on tours of the city's materials recovery facility. The students actively participated in the poster and recycle sculpture contests as well. First place winners of the sculpture contest were chosen by each school, and the finalists were then sent over to the city to be judged for a grand prize winner. For the poster contest, there were over 750 entries. They were all brought to the city, where first, second, and third place winners were determined for each school. Then finally, a grand prize winner was selected from all of the first place posters. We would like to thank Vertec Waste Industries, who is the refuse and recycling hauler for the city of Victorville, for donating the funds for the awards tonight. And these are amazing prizes. And on that note, we'd like to invite up our winners. The City of Victorville and Vertec Waste Industries would like to congratulate Declan Diaz. Come on up, Declan.
certificate that is for your accomplishment, and we have a check. You know what a check is? $250. Good job.
Good job, Declan. Declan attends the Academy School of Performing Arts and Foreign Language, and he is in Miss Belmuta's kindergarten class. Thank you, Declan, for your participation, and thank you for recycling. We would also like to congratulate the grand prize winner of our recycled sculpture contest. So if our university prep group can come up. This group of student artists are Brian Chari, Nick Turney, and Michael Hernandez. Nick Turney and Michael Hernandez were not able to attend tonight, but we'd like to congratulate them as well.
To get the recognition that you deserve, and I don't know how you're going to divvy up this $250 check, but maybe you could arm wrestle and see if somebody gets the whole thing. Congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, these students are part of the ASB Student Leadership Group, and Mr. Zimmerman is the ASB advisor. The ASB students work together on this project to raise funds for school activities, and the prize will go to the ASB fund. Okay, special care was taken not only to be artistic and creative with this project, as you can see, but also to use all the acceptable curbside recyclable materials to portray their recycling message. Good job, you guys, and thank you for recycling. Let's give these students one last hand here.
Before we go into the formal agenda, we have one more presentation, but it's going to be about a 15-minute presentation. So I want to indicate to folks who may be in the audience for other items that the appeal hearing, item 3 on the City Council agenda, at the applicant's request, has been continued to January 15th, 2007, these chambers, 7 p.m. Item M on the City Council consent calendar, this item is being removed from the consent calendar. And under written communications on the City Council agenda, item 6, this item has been removed from the agenda. So if you're here for any of those particular reasons, those items either are pulled or will be continued. With that,
Excuse me, Mayor. The next meeting will be in 2008.
You're right. I stand corrected. 2008.
January 15th, 2008.
The presentation now will be a 15-minute presentation from representatives of Sandbag who are going to brief us on the current Victor Valley transportation plan. And so we will turn it over to our colleagues from San Bernardino.
Thank you very much, Mayor, council members. We have been working on the Victor Valley Area Transportation Study now for almost 2 years. We call it VVATS for short. You'll hear that acronym throughout the presentation. We have been collaborating with the cities, the county, and Caltrans in conducting this work. J.D. Douglas of Kimley Horn and Associates is the consultant on the project. He's been working, again, in collaboration with a technical group. We do have a draft report that is out for review. What we wanted to do this evening is give you a brief presentation, an overview of the draft report, so that we can get some policy level input. So feel free to comment on any aspect of this before we finalize the report, which will be within the next month or so. You'll see when JD presents the information that there's some challenging messages in here. There are some demands in a growing area like this that present mobility challenges. There are financial challenges in particular, and I hope we can really get some good input as to how you think we should proceed in trying to make sure that this is a financially viable plan. We don't want this to sit on the shelf. We want it to be real and useful to all the cities involved. So I'm going to introduce J.D. Douglas, and J.D. is going to lead us through the presentation.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As Steve mentioned, we've been working on this study for about 2 years, and I'm going to just go over the study objectives, a brief review of existing traffic conditions throughout the valley, forecasts of future traffic conditions with the projected growth to almost 700,000 people in the year 2035, a discussion of how possibly to pay for the roadway improvements that are needed to serve that many people, and then some recommendations and remaining issues that Steve alluded to a moment ago. The objectives of the study were threefold, primarily to develop a long-range roadway system for the valley No one has ever looked at the valley as a system prior to now. The individual jurisdictions have looked at their own needs, but this was an opportunity to look at it all together and to have an idea of how it might be funded as a component of the Measure I strategic plan for 2010 to 2040. And a third element was to develop a corridor preservation strategy to maintain opportunities for future corridors. As we look at the map of existing conditions, on the maps I'll be showing you, the roads highlighted in blue are areas of congestion. And in the existing condition, there are a number of arterial streets and freeway interchange areas around I-15 that experience congestion during the peak hours. When we forecast out to the year 2035, our baseline scenario includes improvements that already have committed funding. And we can see that those improvements that are already committed are not nearly enough to service the needs of 700,000 people in the valley in the future. And so we began to look at alternative improvement options. The improvements included looking at full build-out of all of the city's plans of arterial streets, as well as these new highway corridors and interchanges along Interstate 15 that you see in this graphic. We evaluated a number of alternatives, some of them with a higher level of investment, some with a lesser level of investment, so that we could determine how much congestion there would be depending on the amount of roadway investment that was made up to the year 2035. This shows our high investment scenario that includes all three of the corridors forming essentially a beltway around the valley. And as you can see, it addresses much of the congestion and eliminates much of what we saw in the baseline map. If we scale that back and look at a moderate level of investment that includes the high desert corridor from 395 out to Highway 18 in Apple Valley, but does not include the western and southern parts of the Beltway, the level of congestion increases, particularly on Highway 138, Interstate 15, 395, and interchange areas. So we have a sense that a major amount of investment in roadway infrastructure is needed, and that led us into evaluation of some of the funding issues. That map that I showed you of the high investment, including all three corridors in the Beltway system, would cost about $6 billion over the almost 30 years to the year 2035. That moderate level system is about $3 billion. But as we noted when we saw the congestion in the moderate level slide, that level of investment still leaves a number of hot spots around interchanges of the I-15 and in certain other areas of the valley. We did look at scaling back even more so that the level of investment was below $3 billion, but what we call a bare bones kind of system just would not be sufficient to handle the needs, travel needs of 700,000 people. So looking at the $3 billion system, we assume that we have improved certain key arterials such as US 395 to carry high flows of traffic for a 6-lane arterial. But when we add up all of the available funds for the roadway needs, we have about a $700 million shortfall. We created this table that compares the potential funding strategies across the top with the improvements in the system down the side. And what it shows you basically is that the arterial system and the interchange and overcrossing improvements that are needed are expected to have funding available from developer fees, from Measure I monies, and from state and federal sources, but that the new highways, both widening Interstate 15 and constructing that first major segment of the High Desert Corridor do not have sufficient funding identified yet, and that's where most of the $700 million shortfall is. So, facing the challenge, and it is a daunting one with that big of a funding gap, I don't know if it's consolation or not, but you're not the only high-growth area that is facing challenges like this. The Valley, over the last number of years in its Measure I program, has poured most of its measure dollars into the state highway system and still has a lot of needs. The funding situation has changed, as you know, in recent years, with SB 45 giving the responsibility for highway improvements to the locals in urban areas. So in this area, it comes through Sandbag's programming authority for those funds. So no longer are Caltrans and the federal government automatically able to step in and provide all of the money that's needed. Some areas have turned to much higher development fees to solve their problems. As an example, the city of Santa Clarita has adopted development fees approaching $20,000 per unit for roadway improvements. So there are some other areas of the Southern California that are facing similar problems as the Victor Valley is. How do we fill the funding gap? Well, we've talked with our technical committee about a number of possibilities, and the ones that appear most promising and viable, naturally turning to the state and federal governments for help should be done and is an important step. The challenge there is nowadays, as we mentioned, there are not as many funds coming through state and federal sources, and as you can imagine, the competition for them is becoming fiercer and fiercer all the time. We looked at how much revenue could be generated if Measure I was extended with another ½ cent for 10 years starting in the year 2025, and that would generate approximately $545 billion in addition to what's already coming in from the current Measure I. We looked at how much money could be.
Is that, you're talking about a statewide tax or just Victorville, or San Bernardino tax?
It would need to be adopted as a San Bernardino County-wide measure. There's not the legislative authority to do it just for the Victor Valley. We looked at additional development fees, and to generate approximately $500 million would require about $4,000 per dwelling unit on the development forecast between now and the year 2035. Obviously, those are asking a lot to consider funding possibilities like that when you've just been through a Measure I extension, when you've just been through a fee program with Sandbag with the Nexus study. But as Steve mentioned, those are the challenges that need to be faced. So my concluding slide is mostly questions that we would like to get feedback and comments from the council members as much as possible tonight so that we can wrap them into our final report as we put that together. Number one, your thoughts on how to generate the additional $700 million that will be needed between now and the year 2035. Number two, can the High Desert Corridor be planned as a toll road east of US 395? In our funding forecasts, we assumed that it could be, and that did generate well over $100 million of revenue that was counted toward the highway system. Number three, should the cities and counties preserve right-of-way for post-2035 highway improvements? We studied highway needs at build-out of all of the 4 cities' general plans and found that that full beltway system will be needed in that long-term scenario. But if you're not able to build it between now and 2035, either the right-of-way needs to be preserved or future demand needs to be served in other ways, such as enhanced arterials and other modes of travel. So those are the questions that I throw out for your consideration. I'd be happy to get any responses, thoughts, observations, or answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. Council?
Number 3 draws my ire a bit because it alludes to cities and counties preserving right-of-way. Here we are suggesting we build a state highway, and we can't even have the state stand up and protect that right-of-way and protect inverse condemnation proceedings against local entities or anything else. The 210, we were celebrating finishing that up, and quite frankly, I wish that a lot of people would realize and get angry at how long it took to finish the 210. Thanks to one of our former governors, Jerry Brown, if we don't build it, they won't come philosophy. We got 10 years behind in our building of our highways. No fault of Sandbags or anybody else. The state's incompetence and total irrational spending habits. I can't see asking local government to stand up and generate a great deal of revenue when the state doesn't even protect us, when they're stealing our Prop 42 monies and everything else, which is more or less walking around money, but nevertheless it's still it's an amount of money that ought to be preserved and kept here. And every time you made a great presentation, everything you said is absolutely right on target. We need these things. This growth area needs these things, but the citizens deserve the state of California being responsible about this and recognizing that their growth is moving around, and with that movement comes responsibility. And every month when I go down there, you hear me harping on it. There's a number of things that we could do even today that would help mitigate some of this, and we won't. Now, I'm not talking about Sandbag. I'm talking about the state legislature and the governor's office. So you're standing up here asking, and I had to chew on somebody, and thank you for JD for taking that. But the frustration is there. I'm sitting on this board now for 3 or 4 years now, and it's just really frustrating for us to run into some things that are completely doable that we could push aside, whether it's the environmental review process and the other things that do is to speed up things like this, to cut the cost down. If you throw out the environmentals, you probably cut down 25% of the cost of the $700 million. Isn't $700 million, it's $500 million, and those kind of things, But the state legislature has to have the will to do that, and they don't. Your presentation is good, but I doubt whether in this county at least, we're up here in the high desert for sure, that you're going to get an extra tax to do this. We're going to have to make do with what we've got and twist as many arms as we can from the federal and state level to get our fair share in play. But the plan that you've outlined here is good and accurate, and thank you for the work.
Well, the city's struggling right now to figure out how to get $1.5 million to pay for paramedics. I don't know that I can give you an answer on number one. Taxes aren't a popular thing. Raising another ½ cent is, I don't know how successful we would be again. We know we were very successful last time, but I can't give you an answer how we do that right now. Number two, I have mixed emotions about toll roads. I guess someone would have to show me how well they do in California. I travel some of the toll roads and don't see they're very busy, so I don't know how it would work. I know there's companies that have told us they work well, maybe so. I'd be willing to look at that by all means if it's a viable option to use. The right of way, I'm kind of with Mike. It doesn't seem like the state of California steps up to the plate on much of anything, especially our roadways. It's all left up to the local authorities, and let's face it, we don't have the money to do it. I think the state needs to do their share, and they haven't been doing it for years. Number three, I don't have a whole lot of answers for you. Of course, you're just presenting this to me right now, so I'd really have to think about it, and I think we have to discuss it. So it doesn't help you much.
The comments are appreciated, though. It's a lot to digest in a short amount of time. I appreciate that.
Well, I have very hardcore positions on most of these. First, long before you would have been involved with Sandbag, I was involved with the city of Adelanto when it was just a fledgling city before the town of Apple Valley and the city of Hesperia were incorporated. That was my first experience with the realignment and improvement of 395. 35 years ago, I was mayor of this city for my first time. And our council then felt that the most seriously impacted city, San Bernardino County, with regard to 395 was Adelanto. Victorville referred to Adelanto, supported Adelanto's position for the realignment of 395. There was no controversy. Adelanto was a much smaller community than it is today, and Victorville likewise. 35 years ago, today we've got nothing on the books for 395. So I've kind of reached the point of scrapping the whole idea of trying to do anything with 395, at least from a local jurisdiction standpoint. Like my colleagues on this council, I'm not interested in another study or another set-aside of resources to again study what is pretty obvious in terms of how you deal with 390. Today, chances of getting consensus in the desert to do the right things for 395, I think, are very difficult. The unincorporated area doesn't want it to go west. And the County Board of Supervisors has got some issues they have to deal with. We don't want it going through the heart of the developed area of Victorville and cutting into what we're doing at George Air Force Base. So, you know, you pretty well shrink the alignment issue to widening what we already got or going way west. So, I mean, I don't know how many additional studies we ought to do on 395. I, for one, think we ought to scrap it. If and when the federal government and the state government ever get their act together, which is probably never in any of our lifetimes, maybe it'll be revisited, but that's my thought on 395. I happen to be intrigued with the idea of toll roads. I have driven the toll roads in Orange County a lot. I was initially a skeptic. I'm not going to spend money for a transponder, and I'm not going to get off the freeway and put money in the toll booth. Now I keep the transponder on my dash because it's the only feasible way to get around Orange County during parts of the day. So Victorville, independently of the other cities and Sandbag, are actively exploring with private sector companies the concept of toll roads, both from the standpoint of the E220 corridor as well as some of the other possible major arterials and the Beltway or the Loop or whatever we end up calling that. I've seen this work in Europe. Some of us have gone to Europe and actually talked to the companies who have entered into the public-private partnership to build toll roads where government, again, has failed. And so that is an open possibility from my standpoint. Victorville probably will be forced to do the 20 segment from the I-15 to 395 on its own. We can't wait to 2035. You know, we have opportunities to generate 30 to 40,000 jobs at George Air Force. That E220 corridor is essential, that opportunity. We simply can't wait. Now, easier said than done, but we're going to really explore some very creative and innovative ways to try to get the 220 started and started soon. And frank with you, we're not looking for any assistance from the state or the feds because we know it won't be there. If we wait for that, then the economic opportunities that are available to us today will evaporate. So we simply can't. We simply can't wait. The idea of a half-cent sales tax going back before the voters, I think, in today's environment, very unlikely. I mean, when the economy is in straits that it's in now, trying to talk people into further taxing themselves, I think, overly optimistic. But I don't think that that idea should be scrapped. I think that times improve, attitude and the support for something like that. Everybody is fed up with the congestion of the roads. More so here perhaps than other places that are somewhat static, but we're not static. So if you've got a backup on Bear Valley Road today, next year the backup's going to be worse simply because we're adding more rooftops and cars on the road. So I'm open on the issue of a half-cent sales tax extension. Of course, it only works if every city in the county is in agreement, and finding the spark plug to pull all of that together again is going to be difficult. But I would hope that Sandbag would keep that high on possibilities. None of us have the answers, and you know, you folks are transportation experts, and you labor in the vineyards day in and day out. I respect you for trying to figure out how to take a very, very small budget and bootleg it up into something that is worthwhile. I don't envy you in doing that, but the reality is that a good part of the county, including their representatives on Sandbag, have historically never had the interest or concern of what happens in the desert. Had the Mojave County movement years ago, is that, right or wrong, the perception is that we are outside the normal legislative and decision-making process, and we don't get our fair share. It has improved tremendously over years, but that is an attitude that permeates the governmental and the governance process in the desert, not just Victorville, but everybody up here. So, you know, one of the things that we have to do is we have to be able, with some level of confidence, to tell our constituents and our peers in the other cities that finally the county and Sandbag has bought into the importance of transportation needs in the desert, because this is the growth center for the county in the future. Most of this county is now built out and not going to change much. But the desert is the future of San Bernardino County. I believe Supervisor Metzenfeld understands that, and I hope that he and others, and you working with the staffs at Sandbag, will be able to convince the allocation process can't continue to be distributed on the basis of head count in the 5 districts, because if that philosophy continues, 2035, if any of us are still alive, we'll be back here having the same conversation. There's got to be a shift from the other 4 districts of some of the dollars so that we can begin to catch up with the neglect that has existed for at least the 35 years I've been in public service. I think it's a great presentation. I hope it doesn't stop here. I want to thank you for coming up and taking the time to present it, and I want you to tell your colleagues that you're on board with these issues and these concerns. But we can't wait to 2035.
Mayor Caldwell, may I
Sure.
add comments to tonight? First one is an observation on the existing congestion. Bear Valley Road designated currently as level of service E or F, except for the stretch between the I-15 and Hesperia Road. I'm surprised by that because that's contrary to my driving experience on Bear Valley Road. My understanding of level E or F, if you can't get through a signal on one cycle, you're in there. But if Sean McGlade has improved it that much, my hat is off to him.
Well, if Sean McGlade has done that, it hasn't been noticed by the people who communicate with me.
No.
As they sit there on their cell phone raising hell.
On the improvements evaluated on US 395, there are several alternative corridors on the south segment of that, one of which is a segment that was previously presented to this city council by the now executive director of Sandbag, Deborah Barmack, and that alignment was unanimously rejected by our city council. So I don't know if that's on here just as an oversight. As an engineer, I certainly believe in the necessity to preserve right-of-way, but under the U.S. Constitution, property owners must be compensated for the value of their property. And if the city of Victorville were to choose to use its police powers for right-of-way preservation either through the development process or through eminent domain, where would the funds come from to compensate those landowners for their property?
Very good question, Mr. City Manager, and not one that's been answered yet.
And the last one, gotta tell you, as a native of California, how disappointed I am. The amount of money, although I think it's accurate, for all of these improvements that is identified to come from the state and federal government. We all pay taxes. And for that pittance to be returned to our taxpayers, and because of that shortage, our citizens are being asked to now pay more dollars through development impact fees or Measure I money, I think is criminal for the state to divert the tax dollars that our citizens pay for transportation into other non-transportation related issues. I think it'd be illegal. And the elected officials that represent each city that sit on Sandbag, I think, ought to band together with their fellow agencies and file a lawsuit against the state of California to protect the taxpayers for the transportation dollars they already give to the state.
Thank you. I don't envy you standing before all of the city councils that you've got to go before and discuss this, but we are appreciative.
I appreciate all of you just taking the time to share your thoughts, because this is helpful in us putting together. There are not easy answers, obviously, and being able to stand here and listen to you all share your thoughts from where you're sitting gives us a little better perspective on how to package it and some ideas on how to move forward, hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Okay, with that, we will now go back to the regular agendas on all of the entities that I previously opened the public hearing process at 7 o'clock. Item 1 on every one of those agendas, public comment. If you're going to speak to the council, to the redevelopment agency, to the airport authority, to the rail authority, to the library board, to the water district, please fill out one of these white cards. They're available in the foyer. Pass them to the city clerk so that we will be able to call you by name and then have the information necessary to communicate with you in the future should we need to supply you with additional information or need to request additional information from you, or to notify you that we have in fact set an agenda item to discuss whatever the particular topic might be. You're limited to 3 minutes, and the first card I have is Thomas Gormley. Mr. Gormley?
Good evening. I have a situation with my property on Palmdale Road, 12970, this particular property. I've owned this property for 27 years. Property has been inspected probably 60 times. This is a conditional use permit. And on the bottom of this conditional use permit, certificate of occupancy, it says failure to maintain compliance makes this document invalid. Gentlemen, I have done everything possible to stay within legal ramifications, zoning, licenses, and permits. Man moved out of this property. It was a car lot. I had it as a car lot in 1982. When small business meant something, like Shaw Hardware and Builders Emporium. Now, there's a gentleman in the office, or in the audience, and he would like to rent this property. His tax, sales tax, for this year so far have been $29,000. He wants to sell statuary and bird feeders. I was selling cars. I come in here, we come down together to get a license. They sent us to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission don't like the driveway on Emerald Road. They sent us to engineer. They don't like the driveway on Palmdale Road. And it'll be 6 weeks on the inside before they would approve him moving. He is going to lose his lease. We are going to lose him as a small business in Victorville unless someone steps in and changes just the name on the certificate of occupancy. That's all that's needed. The building is the same. I couldn't bring the rules or the licenses and permits in here unless I borrowed one of my grandkids' wagons. I got a file on this property this thick. And be frankly honest with you, I give up. If this council can't step in and do something to get this man into this place by the end of the year, and I have this problem every time I go to rent a property. They come in here and one sends you to the other, to the other, to the other. And it can't go on like this. I can't understand. We're not a 500 Fortune company. We're a small business, and you're putting us on the same category as these big box buildings. And it's just not going to work. The infrastructure is going to kill us. I can't put any more into this place, and there's no reason I should, because all the permits and everything are done. It costs us tens of thousands of dollars to get annexed into this city. And now, it started right from the beginning. Conditional use permits. I was under the impression that the certificate of occupancy, they told me in planning, goes with the property. Why can't he move in without all of this nonsense and putting up $300 or $400 or $500? And then there's no guarantee that he's going to be to get in there. I leave it up to you. Should we throw him out of the city or what? He'll move on.
Well, Mr. Gormley, there's no way we can respond to that tonight, but I will tell you that there are representatives of both engineering and planning in the audience, and they will provide a detailed response, which you'll get a copy of it within a week.
Well, it's been 10 days now. Now there's another week. That's 17 days.
Well, we do not have the authority sitting at this dais to just simply say he gets to move in. We obviously don't have any information other than what you presented with us tonight. But I gave
you couldn't talk to you couldn't get him to rush this thing through. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It defies all logic.
Mr. Gormley, I gave you far more than the 3 minutes. We're cognizant of the issue, and
yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here, if you'd like to talk to him.
Norm Miller.
Mayor, council members, my name is Norm Miller with the Golden Triangle Ad Hoc Committee. It's getting kind of interesting. We've been trying to get some improvements over in the Golden Triangle, especially on Sycamore. And one of the problems is flooding. And I noticed that the new houses that were put in near 395, they put in a storm drain on Sycamore that goes nowhere. I've complained about that some more, and now they put up a sign, flooded, at times. So I guess that's the way you cure flooding problems, is just let people know it's going to be flooded. We're still trying to get Sycamore straightened out a little bit. We had an accident over there where a car went through a fence into a bedroom and killed a lady. Well, now I noticed since this picture here that they put up a sign that Sycamore is no longer maintained by the city of Victorville. And that kind of caught me by surprise. So I went and took a picture of it, but I also noticed it's on both sides of the Edison easement. And so I guess where Edison is, you're not going to maintain the road anymore. But my question goes from there is, what are you going to do about Cobalt between Sycamore and Baldy Mesa or Bear Valley Road, because that same power line passes across there. And what are you going to do about Bear Valley Road, because that same power line crosses Bear Valley Road? Are you not going to maintain those roads either? Or is this just another way of not having to do something? One other question I have, little question, is anything going to be done with Eucalyptus to get it through to 395 so the traffic can get onto 395 at a signal rather than coming on at Sycamore, which is still just as dangerous as it ever was? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Last card I have from Dorothy Miller.
Miller, Demeron Road. Council members, I have a few little problems. I would like to know what happened to the retreat that all, and that means all 5 of you, agreed to have. I know you had the first one, but what happened to the November 13th meeting? I feel the whole council plays follow the leader. No one seems to have the backbone to vote the way they really feel. Council members should make their own decisions. Everybody should make their own decisions on how to vote on these things. These 5-0 votes constantly, something is wrong. And I feel you people should really sit down and look at what's happening here with the city, because there's a lot of things going on. Thank you.
Okay, that's all of the cards I have for public comment. Was there anyone else in the audience who had intended to speak under public comment? If not, then we will move to the library agenda. Mr. Hunter?
Mr. Mayor, the only thing on the library agenda is a closed session item, and that's on the agenda. There's nothing else.
Then we will move to the Rail Authority agenda, and there are no revisions to that agenda, so unless there's an urgency add-on item, we will adjourn the Rail Authority.
Can do that.
We'll go to the Airport Authority. Again, there are no revisions to the Airport Authority. We do have the consent calendar. That'll be adopted with one vote.
Move for approval.
Second.
Vote. Item 4 is a companion item to number 9 on the City Council agenda, so we will deal with both of them simultaneously. Item 4 and item 9 deal with the authorization to execute a security agreement with General Electric.
Mr. Mayor, I believe we were going to pull this item until the next meeting, since we don't have 2 council members.
Mr. Roberts is shaking his head yes, so we're pulling it then as to 4 and 9 on the City Council agenda. All right. Then, unless there's any add-on items, that would conclude the Airport Authority agenda. We'll go to the Redevelopment Agency agenda. Again, we have a consent calendar adopted with one motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Vote. Agenda item 4 is a request to approve an option to purchase agreement between the Victorville Redevelopment Agency and Cosmont Stevens Development, LLC, BBA Renaissance Community Fund, and authorize the execution of that document by the Director of Economic Development. Questions or comments from members of the Redevelopment Agency Board? If not, a motion would be in order.
Move for approval.
Second.
Vote.
Sorry about that. Okay.
Agenda items 5 and 6 we'll do together. This is property acquisition, and we refer to generally as Old Town. The 2 parcels that we will be voting on to acquire is 16924 Forest Avenue and 15481 7th Street. That's as to item 5. Item 6 is the property located at 15442 8th Street. In both instances, the motion would be to not only purchase, but to provide the additional appropriations from our Series 07 housing set-aside bonds. Questions or comments from members of the Redevelopment Agency Board?
Move for approval on 5 and 6.
Second.
Seconded, may we vote? Item 7 is the closed session items that are enumerated on the agenda. Unless there's an emergency add-on item, that would conclude the redevelopment agency agenda.
Staff has nothing to add.
Then we will move to the Water District agenda. I'm not aware of any revisions. We do have a series of consent items. Don't see any changes to that, so
Move for approval.
seconded, may we vote? Again, unless there's an add-on item, that will conclude the Water District agenda. Now we go to the City Council agenda. And I've already previously identified the items that are not going to be dealt with. The appeal hearing number 3 continued to January 15th, 2008.
Mayor, even though it's an appeal hearing, I would ask that you just open it and continue it. Sometimes we give notice to other interested property owners.
We're also going to delete from the consent calendar item M, and we are going to delete item 6 from the council written communications. So with those notations for revisions to the agenda, we will now go to the appeal hearing on advice of council, even though we're going to take absolutely no action. I will open on agenda item 3 the appeal hearing dealing with proposed resolution number 07274. Invite anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard for or against, pro or con, on the appeal hearing identified as agenda item number 3, and the appellant is Quan West Management, LLC. Anybody who wishes to be heard? Hearing none, I will continue the appeal hearing to January 15th, 2008. Item 4 is a public hearing to consider proposed ordinance 2217, which, if adopted, would decrease the state law maximum speed limit on various streets which have been identified in our agenda. Before I open the public hearing, any questions or comments from members of the council? Hearing none, I'll open the public hearing and invite anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard for or against, pro or con, with regard to proposed ordinance 2217. Hearing no public comment, I'll close the public hearing. Ask the city clerk to read the title of ordinance 2217.
An ordinance number, let me start over here. A public hearing called to hear arguments for or against the introduction. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay.
Need my hard drive?
Yeah, where'd we go?
An ordinance of the City of Victorville establishing speed zones upon certain streets in said city and amending Section 12.20.020 of the Victorville Municipal Code entitled Decrease of State Law Maximum Speed on Various Streets.
Introduction.
Motion to waive further reading
Second.
and to introduce.
Yes.
Second.
May we vote? That concludes the public hearing. We now have the consent calendar. The items have been previously identified as routine and non-controversial. They'll be adopted with one motion unless there's a request for removal. And we do have a request that item M, which is the approval of the final map for track 17308 SunCal, that one will come off. A motion for the balance of the consent calendar would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded, may we vote? Just as a matter for the record, is item M coming back to us at some future point in time? Item 6 request to implement a study and an analysis for the development of a paramedic program. My understanding this is going to be continued to the next regularly scheduled council meeting on December 18th, when hopefully we'll have a full council.
Correct.
Item 7 is a request to approve funding for the Boys and Girls Clubs. I think both Mr. Hunter and Mr. Rothschild have some comments on that.
Well, I sat down and saw their programs that they had, both as an after-school program, youth development, and education. It's incredible the energy and the professionalism that this organization has put on the ground. We've known the Boys and Girls Club for almost 100 years, but the new program basically that we have here in the Victor Valley is going to be something special. I would recommend that the council support the Boys and Girls Club. I had a number in mind, but I think Mr. Hunter came up with the number, so we'll.
No, I think we both talked about the number, but the Boys and Girls Club here in the Victor Valley really is a benefit to the children, and I think it's going to go hand in hand with our U-Turn program of trying to keep young people out of gangs, giving them something to do after school, special projects. Just a great organization for, I think, the city, and I think $2,500 is a good start.
Got a motion?
It is.
Been moved and seconded. May we vote? Item 8 is a request to adopt a whole series of resolutions, which are laid out in the agenda, and thus there are questions or comments from members of the council. A motion to...
So moved.
Seconded. May we vote? Agenda item 9 has been dealt with along with item 4. And that's been continued to the next regularly scheduled council meeting, December 18th, 7 p.m. These chambers. Item 10 is proposed resolution 07342, which, if adopted, would support the concept and efforts of the Victorville Police Department needed to conduct a driver under the influence DUI traffic safety project. Questions or comments from members of the council?
Move for approval.
Moved and seconded. May we vote? Item 11 is a request to reject all bids on the 5-year municipal lease for the fleet vehicles of 43 vehicles, project number ESO8-003. Are there any questions or comments from members of the council?
I'd move that item.
Seconded. May we vote? Item 12, reports from council members. Mr. Hunter.
I was able to go to the Board of Supervisors meeting this morning in San Bernardino County and received a proclamation from Supervisor Mitzelfeld and the entire board, actually, in support of our U-Turn program, and also the applying for a joint grant with San Bernardino County, both the Sheriff's Department, Probation, the City of Victorville, for the Cal GRIP program. Hopefully we're shooting for $500,000, which would give us funding to place probation officers within the city to work on our U-Turn program and help along with this program. We've got great support from the Board of Supervisors, from the Sheriff's Department to probation, the community at large, and I think this is going to be a great program.
Good. Mr. Rothschild? I have nothing. I will invite the council and appropriate staff into closed session for the various litigation personnel items that are set forth on the various agendas for the various entities that we dealt with tonight. With that, we thank you for coming. You're welcome to stay. It is not anticipated that there will be any reportable action at the conclusion of this closed session, but I can't guarantee that. But I want you to know if we come out and these chambers are vacant, we will not be offended by that. Have a good evening.